What is going on with Henry Louis Gates? What is going on with Cornel West? Who says that black leaders, serious black leaders, must be race transcending? How the hell are you going to be a serious black leader and be race transcending? But that's the dilemma of the assimilationists. They want race and not race at the same time. They want to organize black people based on blackness so that they can get rid of blackness. They want to use your black interests, your black feelings, and your black identity to advance their program so they can tell you later that blackness does not matter, that color has nothing to do with it. We are better off when we don't even refer to ourselves as black. We are better off when we amalgamate with the other people to the point of invisibility. If power is based on a collective identity, if power is based on social cooperation, if power is based on shared history and shared values and shared goals, how can you have power when you tell people that they cannot identify themselves on any basis whatsoever and that they should become individuals without any identity whatsoever? So consequently, this organization cannot empower black people. As a matter of fact, when we look at its history, we recognize immediately that this organization has not only been wrong-headed, it has actually been destructive to black people. And therefore, the assimilationist, moralist leadership must be destroyed and a new leadership structure built on its ruins. Yes. You don't want to deal with it, then stay with it and die. Yes. This is the deal. There's only one serious leadership structure available for African people. And that's the leadership struggle provided by African nationalism. It's the only way to go. There's no other way around. You must understand, but see, some people have deceived you about nationalism. What nationalism is and what it isn't. Some people have told you that nationalism means race hatred. That it means, one race being superior to another race. It's the same kind of joke that they tried to tell you about Afrocentrism being the mirror image of what? Eurocentrism. It's a joke. It's not true. Understand what nationalism is. Nationalism is an ideology of 1,000 faces. While we may have a similar sense of what it is, it involves no one definition that can be agreed on. No two types of nationalism are the same, ladies and gentlemen. And we have to recognize that. Nationalism is very important. Nationalism, allied with the sense of nation, offers unity and mutual support, solidarity and identity, structure and cohesion to people who otherwise may feel atomized, insecure, vulnerable, and bereft of stabilizing norms, values, and affirmative social relations. Through nationness and nationalism, the individual transcends his existential aloneness and shares in the much broader virtues and power of the group. His power and that of the group to which he belongs are one. And let us look at nationalism. Nationalism creates focused power which enables the people to achieve ends, which is separate individuals pursuing their own unrelated self-interested ends they could never achieve. The power generated by nationalism is the bane and harbinger of destruction for those who wish to establish or maintain imperial control over other people. What are we saying here then? That some nations may use nationalism as a means of unifying themselves, of creating self-determination, and after doing so, to fill themselves with an ideology of racial superiority and an ideology of manifest destiny, and using their nationalism combined with the sense of manifest destiny and racial superiority, enslave other people and colonize other people. And this is the essence of European nationalism. But the essence of African nationalism is a different type and of a different kind. And we have to understand that clearly before someone confuses us. Black or African nationalism is a nationalism of liberation and self-determination, not of conquest and domination. It is premised on the precept that blacks and African people shall not be the subjects of another people, nor should they subject themselves to other people. That black peoples and nations should exercise the full rights to develop and utilize their material, human, and spiritual resources primarily for their own benefit and well-being, and for the benefit and well-being of others as they see fit. That they are not the inferiors of others and not destined by God or man to exist in the forced servitude of others. And when and if and for whatever and however long they may be willfully subjected to the domination of others, they are commissioned and they are obligated by their inalienable rights as human beings to freedom to resist such domination and overthrow it as soon as humanly possible. So when we talk about an African nationalism, we are not talking about a nationalism of racial superiority, a nationalism where we intend to conquer and rule and enslave another people. An African nationalism is needed to liberate us from the nationalism of others. Nationalism evokes a sense of cohesion and belonging in a people that permits them to cooperate and to coordinate their activities and to align themselves in order to achieve their national and individual freedom. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, it is this leadership that must move to the fore, because the others have been weighed and measured and been found wanting. We see the condition of our people as a result of the leadership of these other groups.
One of the major things in the Marcus Garvey legacy was that of his perception of reality. I often talk about reality in my classes and general lectures so that attendees would recognize that at the center of one's adjustment to the world, at the center of one's ability to deal with the world, to change with the world, to suit one's advantage, is a knowledge of reality. The very essence of pathology, whether political, ideological, economic, social, or psychological, is a lack of knowledge of reality. How can one deal with reality if one does not know what it is? How can you deal with reality if you are blind to it or if it is distorted? It is somewhat interesting that the brain is locked up in the darkness of the skull, yet the brain is the central unit that guides our behavior. It guides that behavior based on the information it receives from our senses. Therefore, our senses must relay to the brain an accurate knowledge of reality. This is the only knowledge ultimately that the brain gets from the outside world. The brain, using its innate capacities, such as reasoning capacities, comparative capacities, basic knowledge, memory, and experience, uses the information given to it by the senses to determine how the person is going to deal and cope with reality. How the individual is going to shape reality to its own purposes. Therefore, if that information is distorted, then the brain determines behavior on that distorted information, and the individual is maladjusted. This is the case with this. This is the case then with a people, and this is the case then with Black people. And happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, and we are doing the second video.
Case. What is going on with Cornel West?
Happy Monday and welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, and we are continuing. This is the second video, but we're continuing our reading and reviewing of Dr. Amos Wilson's book, African-Centered Consciousness versus the New World Order, Garveyism in the Age of Globalism. And today's reading is going from page 43 to page 66. And This is getting into this section is getting into the legacy of Marcus Garvey. Now, the particular the portion that I started reading is about it's in part 1. It start on page 43, part 1, but under the title of Garvey and the Structuring of Reality and Perception. Perception is the subtitle under Garvey and the Structuring of Reality. And Garvey and the Structuring of Reality starts on page 45. I started at the last paragraph on page 46. Perception. How we view reality, how we perceive reality versus what the actual reality is. I talk all the time on this channel about us getting out of our feelings. I talk all the time on this channel about us living in reality as much as possible, us being realistic about our situation and what's happening to us, what has happening to us, and what can happen to us in the future. Getting away from ideal and dealing with reality, because we can shape the ideal world we want to if we deal with our reality. And the reality is we are a colonized people who are at the point of insanity, and we've been programmed by our oppressors to destroy ourselves, and we are destroying ourselves. We're getting worse, we're degrading, and it's time for us to make a change now before we won't be able to make any serious positive change for Black America to have any type of advancement or any type of forward movement to overthrowing oppression or getting rid of oppression, getting rid of those who control us, those who hold us down, getting rid of the programming, building for self, because we're talking about assimilation / integration versus nationalism. Which is best for us? Garvey, people in the mindset of Garvey and Dr. Amos Wilson is pushing nationalism. Black liberal democratic political leaders of today are still pushing assimilation, still pushing integration. We need to be a part of their system. We still champion Black people becoming the first of this and the first of that within white systems. Success in the Black community is us being as accepted and as elevated within white structures as possible. That's success for us. It's not necessarily us building for us. It's us being elevated within white systems and white structures. That is success for us. That is what we celebrate. That is what we hold up. That is what we push to integrate and assimilate versus to have our own and build our own power structure. Remember, if you are assimilated and integrated into white America and you are dependent upon white America, when white America falls, you fall even harder. So this is where we are. So I'm going to continue my reading, picking up on page 46, perception of self-knowledge, perception and self-knowledge. I also see in the legacy of Marcus Garvey, the legacy of self-knowledge. Teachers, wise men and women from eons past have indicated that the foundations of reality and wisdom rest on a knowledge of self, knowing self. We know that at every center of Egyptian philosophy was the admonition, know thyself. This is the essence of wisdom. Garvey thus recognized that a lack of knowledge and amnesia about who and what we are is pathological. That's why he talked about a tree with no roots. A tree with no roots is going to die. A tree with no roots has no future. You have to know who you are and where you come from. But not to get stuck in the past, but to fertilize the future. We recognize today in psychology that amnesia is a pathological state. It's the pathological state of mind that are people who suffer from a lack of knowledge of themselves and of their history, a lack of knowledge of their condition, or people who suffer from a loss of identity, right? We recognize as Garvey recognized that this lack of self-knowledge was deliberately introduced into the mind and psyche of Black people. We could not be Africans and slaves at the same time. We could not be Africans and slaves at the same time. Let me find my place. Okay. We could not hold on to our African identity, our African selves, knowledge of our African culture, and be enslaved. All right. The subordinates of another people. That's what we should remain. That's what they want us to remain. It is only when that knowledge is removed, erased, degraded, stolen, taken, and distorted that we lose our identity. It is then that an identity is placed upon us by another people and by external forces. Therefore, a lack of knowledge, a lack of self-knowledge is a lack of self-awareness. A lack of self-awareness is an insensitivity to the self. But an insensitivity in the self is also an insensitivity to the reality and to the outside world. Without the sensitivity of the outside world and the self, we are left to blindly stumble from one point to another. Ultimately, self-knowledge in its deepest sense is a knowledge of others. We cannot really get to know ourselves deeply without the essence of knowing our enemies and friends, without ultimately knowing the Creator in whatever form or fashion. It reasons that to know the self ultimately involves moving beyond the self and seeing the world from the vantage point of universalism.